Yeah. We'll just start recording. And Wyatt, do you want to bring up the agenda, or would you like me to?
Hey, Corin, I can do it real quick.
Okay, great.
Okay, hopefully that's showing up.
Yes. Yeah. So if you notice on the agenda, we've got the call to order, and then we have 3 sets of minutes to approve, and we put these out early enough that I hope people have had a chance to look at them. Were there any changes for February 27th minutes?
Not really, but I don't recall ever being present in a Zoom meeting. It had me in parentheses, I think.
And
but I'm just going to say, just leave it. That's good.
I don't remember you missing any meetings, so I can't speak to it, but
We can correct that, absolutely, on the minutes.
Oh,
And if I was,
pardon me, this is, oh.
There's Brent. Hi, Brent.
Oh, hello. I didn't mean to interrupt. This is Brent Jones. I understand you guys were looking for me. I was just dialing in.
Wonderful.
If you've already started, I'll hang loose.
Yeah, we just have a couple of, we have one order of business, and that's approving minutes. Can somebody suggest that we approve the minutes for February 27th as they stand?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Let's look at March 25th again. If I think we all had chance to look at them. Any questions or concerns about March 25th minutes?
No.
Okay. Is there an approval?
I approve.
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you. And then how about the April minutes?
I don't have a problem.
Second.
Any second? Okay, great. Okay, that takes us through that. Very good. Janie and Brent, you're next on the agenda.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate the opportunity to be before you this evening. I'm going to leave it up to Brent to do the presentation because he certainly can answer more questions, more technical questions than I can, but I'm here for anything you need me for.
Okay, and Janie, I feel like there was some confusion about either what forms were needed or missing, so I apologize that we've delayed this project for you, and that surely wasn't, our good intent was to move it forward, so
I did know that. I knew you were trying to help, and I'm sorry too, but it is, we've got what we've got, so I'm just happy to be here now.
Okay, great. So Brent?
Oh, okay. Yep, I'm here. Thanks, Janie. And thank you, folks. So I'll go ahead and present. Let's see here. So yeah, there was some issues, some delays in getting, I think, last month's meeting. There's a requirement for a narrative, and I had some missing items in that, but we've got it squared away now. So I suppose I'll begin by just giving you a rundown of what we're doing. The residence is existing, and what we're doing is adding roughly 300 square foot. I mean, it's 299.57. It's 300 square foot. Yeah, and it's going to be basically a bedroom, bath, and closet addition and remodel. So what you've got is you've got a space now that's a bedroom, and we're going to be adding on to it. And once we've added on the space, it's going to be arranged as a new bedroom and new bath. And the site plan, which is the first plan in the sheet, shows general information, lot coverage, the current percentage of the lot coverage will be about 26.27, so say 26% lot coverage. And now also, we've got this new addition. It's within setbacks, well within setbacks. There is a rear yard wall, 6 foot top of wall. Let me see here. Hold on. Top of wall, 6 foot. Yep, 6 foot wall. It's a masonry and stuccoed wall, and there are pictures also attached with the historic submittal package. This wall is going to remain. However, if you take a look at the site plan, it'll show, and it's at the rear of the house, which when you're looking at the site plan drawing is toward the top of the drawing, facing northward. This
Okay.
rear wall, a small section of it will be relocated. And so what the wall is doing now, it has a gate, and it simply allows you to walk outside the backyard, and the wall closes the yard. And so we're going to do the same thing. Wall is still going to enclose the yard. I propose using the same gate. Everything stays the same. It's just that since we're adding onto the rear of the house, the wall will be relocated so it accomplishes the same task, but in the new position as necessary to enclose what will amount to some new yard space as a result of this addition. Now, what I'd also like, and if any of you have any questions, just interrupt me if I'm talking. I don't mind that kind of stuff. I'll just keep rambling unless you interrupt me. But it's perfectly fine if you have questions. But this new addition, what I would like to point out about it is you can't see this thing from the street anywhere. Nevertheless, it's in keeping with the height, the parapet height of what we're coming out is the same as what's existing there now. Windows and doors, I'm cognizant of the historic nature of the neighborhood. And of course, it's in keeping with not only what's existing on the house, but in keeping with neighborhood standards. And this is specified in more detail in the narrative I've prepared. However, so I don't mean to diminish the fact that it is done tastefully and in keeping with what's there. Nevertheless, nobody's going to see this except the homeowners. And there is a neighbor to the east. When they're in the backyard, they'll have a limited view. But there's no real street presence or significant impact that any changes that we're doing is really going to have. You'd have to be at a backyard barbecue to see it. Now, moving
Okay.
on from
Brent?
the site plan.
Well,
Yes.
on this one that you're showing us, I see the wall is kind of angled.
Yep.
Yeah. And how much are you moving it back? How much, so it's in one spot and you're moving it back to accommodate more yard?
So when you look at the site plan, you can see a line that indicates the line of where the wall is now. And then there's kind of an arrow pointing to where the wall is going to be. And you can sort of see that the only real area of the wall that I'm showing is the area that is going to be modified. The wall goes around the whole backyard, but I didn't draw the whole thing there. But the area that's being modified by the scale of the drawing, on that drawing, we're doing what? Oh, let's see. We're at scale. 1 inch equals 10 foot. So 10. So, and the thing is that the wall's not really being moved back necessarily. What's really happening is it's just kind of being moved over. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to die that wall into the far corner of the closet instead, simply for the purpose of maximizing the backyard space without of course encroaching into setbacks. And, but to address your question, how far back, it's not really moving back. It's kind of moving in a diagonal direction. But the distance of that, let me grab a scale out of my desk drawer here real quick. That distance is going to be about 21 inch equals 10 foot. Oh, 13 foot, ma'am.
Okay,
Would you use an arrow when you're talking about this so I have an idea of, the cursor? Can you use your cursor to sort of highlight?
that wall, yeah.
Okay, that wall, okay.
And so the wall that is darkened is the wall that you're adding or changing, moving?
Changing.
That is correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay,
You're welcome.
thanks. Mhm.
You're welcome. Okay, now, sheet number 2 in the plan is demo, which is minimal, and I don't think that's going to concern us too much. The existing back of the house is going to, of course, you're going to have a new room addition there. So, and also there's a window back there, which is now going to be doors, glass doors that are in keeping with what's on the house right now. And I'll get to addressing some of that with photos and things. But right now, to run through the plans, the next sheet is foundation. That's not really going to provide us with anything that I think interests us for this meeting. Foundation, then we move on to reference floor plan. Okay, so I've moved on now to sheet, let's see here, A3, the reference floor plan. And that simply shows what the rooms are. The new addition here, there is going to be some slight modifications to the existing bath, namely the door that goes into the existing bath, instead of a swing door, will be a pocket door to better accommodate the homeowners. And that's about it there. Then, of course, we have in the new space is a bedroom. It's got a sitting area and a walk-in closet, and basically a hallway space gets you there.
Mhm.
So, but what we're doing with this is, aside from the 300 square feet of added space in the rear, the remainder of the space inside the home that will be somewhat modified to accommodate egress to the new space is strictly internal remodeling and really doesn't involve anything structural of load-bearing walls or anything. Certainly nothing from the outside. So really only at the point where you get to the new bedroom, like I say, there's some interior remodel work to address the hallway walking into where will be the new space. But really the only thing you're going to see from the outside or anything that concerns anything with outside visibility is the new 300 square foot addition added space. The next sheet's a dimension plan, and it might be worthy of note. The total length in the best way I can describe it is parallel to the existing porch. That is length that will be added to the length of what the existing porch is now. I call it the porch. It's a house wing, but it has a porch on it. When you see it from the outside, it's a porch, the house with the porch. But that wing of the house will be adding about 18'6" to it. So the entirety of the 300 square foot addition will be coming out 18'6". And it will be in width comparable to what that wing of the house is already. Moving on, roof framing, that's dry material. I don't think we need to cover that. Structural sections is the next sheet.
Well,
And
I have a question, Brent.
Okay.
Sorry. On the new construction for the bedroom, I noticed that the ceiling height is almost, what is it, almost 9 feet? Is it taller than any of the other rooms?
No, it's in keeping with it's pretty much extending out from where the other spaces are. And the reasoning behind this is I have arranged to keep the parapet height of the home. I have arranged to keep the parapet height of the addition the same as what's existing. So we have 12'4" is the parapet height. And so yeah, you're talking about the same ceiling height as well.
Okay.
I mean, it might have behooved us to get a higher ceiling if we were doing some kind of grand master bedroom addition, but for a guest space, it's perfectly suitable. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, now I'm on sheet A5, unless anyone has questions and would like me to go back, but otherwise I'm on A5. And this
Okay, this
sheet
is
shows a couple of, oh, I'm sorry,
Doors
go.
and windows. Yeah, doors and windows. Very good. Yeah.
Doors and windows, and also we have a roof plan. The roof plan is showing drainage, which is in keeping with the existing drainage of that wing of the house. It's draining off to into the yard where the rest of the drainage is. On this roof plan, you can see pretty clear. You have a space that's called out at 221.869 foot. And it has kind of a dotted line which separates it from the remainder of the house. And then another space coming off from that, which is a closet space.
Where you're, okay.
And those two spaces on the roof plan, that's the entirety, that's the totality of the addition. So that's kind of a simple graphic representation of what you've got there. That combined gives you your 300 square foot addition. And the remainder space, as well as the porch, is existing and is undisturbed.
Okay.
On the elevations, we've got a double outswing doors coming into the backyard from the new room. And we have a window for the sitting area that will be a casement type window. Now on the elevation that's designated west elevation, that's the elevation that faces the yard, the backyard. And on that elevation, you'll notice off to the right of the drawing is a window. That's an existing window.
Okay.
At the moment, there is a window that is where this new double doors will be. And the demo plan and the reference floor plan and the dimension floor plan sheets show how this will be filled in to be made doors. There's a new casement style window. I've undertaken to keep in the proportions of the windows in general higher than they are wide. I mean, that double casement window is technically wider than, but each panel is higher than it, because that's an aesthetic that tends to be typical. Not only does it tend to be historically typical, but as a designer, it just looks better to have windows that are higher than they are wide. It's a nice look. I've undertaken to keep that look. But as you can see,
and that
it's
matches the house. That matches the house.
Yes, ma'am. For the most part, it does. Yes, there will be times when it deviates slightly. For instance, you can see on the east elevation, there's an existing window there too, and it appears to be squarish. So, you have, but generally the windows are found to be either casement style or double hung style. The double hung style tends to be higher than it is wide. like the one I've done there on the east end.
Mhm.
And the casement type windows might be the overall window unit. The overall unit might be squarish, but the individual movable panels are distinctly vertical oriented. And it just creates a nice look.
Brent, could
And
you
it tends
scroll
to be in
down?
keeping.
Could you scroll down to show us the east? There we go. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yes, there's the east.
Okay.
And on that east elevation, you can see that new window I'm adding there is a double hung, but you can also see there's an existing window. And then if we see, I scrolled up here, and there's the west, okay. And we've already examined the roof plan. Then if I scroll down a little bit, we see, okay, so now on the north elevation, that would basically be the side of the house that no one sees. The birds and the animals are going to see that. But what this elevation does show is you can see off to the on the north elevation, you can see towards the left side of it the drainage scupper, indicating and double referencing the roof plan, kind of referencing what the roof plan already shows, which is that drainage is coming out on the east end of the house there, which when viewed on the north elevation is off to the left.
And Brent, I thought I saw a single door, not that double door to the back, but a single door that was off to the other side. Am I wrong that there was a single door in that room?
Nope, you are right. And let me scroll back to that page. Let's go back to a floor plan sheet here. Here's a dimension floor plan, but even better yet is a reference floor plan. Now you should be seeing that single door.
There it is.
But
And it's a new door, right?
yes,
And what is it? What's it look like? Does it match a door that's in
Matches-
existence?
It matches all of the other doors coming out of
Okay.
the kitchen and the bedroom and the living room.
Thank you.
We have double doors coming off the living room that will match the double doors on the new space. And then the new door on the bedroom will match our single doors.
Okay, perfect. It's what I wanted to know. That's perfect. Thanks, Jenny.
okay, thanks, Jenny. And now let's see what else was there here. Oh, now we just get into electrical, plumbing, mechanical. And then now I'm scrolling through mechanical specs. I have the narrative sheets now. Do we want to take a read through that? Or would you like me to get to the photos and start addressing what we can see in some of the photos? Or else I can also answer some more questions at this point.
I have a mechanical question. Are you putting mechanics on the roof or on the ground?
On the roof.
Putting
On the roof?
on the roof,
And
and that's
here's-
where they are on the existing house.
The roof.
Yeah,
they
so the,
it's going to be replaced. We have one there now. We're going to remove it and add a bigger one that will serve the new room as well as that end of the house.
Okay. And has it set? We always are concerned that, like you said, there's a neighbor who sees one part of the house. How nice for the neighbors not to have to look at electrical things or the coolers if they don't have to.
It will be in the same place that the
Current-
HVAC unit is, and it's not visible from the ground anywhere. Or
Wonderful.
from next door. Actually, nothing is visible from next door because there is a 6-foot solid wood fence there. So there's no visibility whatsoever from anyone. And there's a grove of mesquite trees to the north, and you can't see it from there either.
Great. Good. Thanks. So putting it out to Margot and David, do you want to hear the narrative to go through? Are you satisfied? Should we just look at photos?
I'd say look at photos. He can maybe do narrative with the photos.
Yeah.
Oh, well, let's see here. How are these photos reading? They're sideways on my display.
They're,
They-
they're,
Oh,
They're
right.
correct,
okay,
Brent.
they're
I
good.
adjusted them when you resubmitted.
It might be helpful to magnify them a little bit.
Yes. Are they showing sideways on your end?
No, they're
Not this
straight.
set, no.
Okay. So the front of the house is, let's see here, I have, a couple of photos.
You had a request to make them larger. Can you do that? That's better.
There we go. Take them one by one.
Okay. Okay, now, so the first one is the front view from, oh, let's see, you'd be looking from the, well, you'd be standing off to the left, looking at the house. And it's very typical in this neighborhood to have quite a bit of natural vegetation that severely impedes your view, which is good. It gives a nice degree of privacy. So there's a very limited availability of being able to see what's going on back from the street. I mean, you get 20 foot back from the street and you're not seeing much with any of these properties. Some of them a little more than others, but Dave and Janny's property here is very nicely tucked in, if you will. Here's a view of the garage end of the house. It's a little bit cut off, but I have other pictures. But we'll see as we look at the pictures that you're not going to see any of this new addition from the street at all. At the lower end of the screen, you should be seeing a view that is not the front of the house at all. It's actually a side of the house that doesn't even pertain to what we're doing. It's the west end of the house. But all these photos serve to give you some indication of what typical windows are looking like. And we intend to match that. Also, you can see the sand troweled stucco color and finish. Well, stucco and paint color, which we will match. I'll take this moment to address something with the lighting zone for this neighborhood is E3. But we're not adding any lighting, exterior lighting. And all lighting that's on the house now is appropriately shielded for dark sky preservation. So I just thought I'd take a moment we won't be doing any glaring security lights that blind you at night. You know, that wouldn't do, and we're not doing that. Let me move on to some photos here that we can see. Oh, well, this is an aerial view. And this kind of shows, okay, this view here is a telling one. I don't know if any of you can't see this clear, let me know. But we see, I actually took this straight from Google. We can see the house in question, 5401. Now, if you look at the, best I can describe it is at the sort of lower right area, you can see some sort of box-looking things on the roof. That's the mechanical. And that equipment will be replaced. And as Janny just said now, with a bigger unit. Well, it's a unit that has a bigger capacity for the square footage of home that it can condition. But the unit's not any notably different size. I mean, it's the dimensions of the actual mechanical unit are not going to be any notable different. It's similar. In terms of the actual size, it's not going to stick up from the, and the thing is, you have some parapet, how do you explain it here? So when you have those built up roofs on these flat houses, the parapet walls are flat, of course, but the roof is slightly sloped for water runoff, and the parapet just serves to contain the runoff water so that you can control where you want to drain it. But the thing about those parapet walls is that they're also very useful for concealing equipment, because you always have a roughly 18-inch to 2-foot drop or more from the top of the parapet wall to the roof, typical with that style of construction. And so when you're already sufficient in height, such as you are at 12'4", to really impede the view from the ground of anything that's on the roof, and then you add to that the fact that the roof itself is always somewhere near 2 foot below the actual parapet, you're not going to see any of that. But it helps for you to see that that is where the equipment is now, and that's the same place that the new capacity unit will be mounted. And all the ductwork will simply run in the same path that the ductwork is running now. See, the mechanical systems that are feeding this wing of the house, they simply need to be extended to feed out. It's the same, mechanical path. You're just extending it out a little bit. When you look at the upper right, you can see where the end of that wing of the house is, and we're just going to come out from there a little bit, about less than 19 foot out. And so that's what's going on there.
Wyatt, or I'm sorry, Brent. This
Yeah.
may not be within our charge, but I am curious about the vegetation back there and what might need to be removed, and also if there are any sort of drainage patterns that would be altered with the addition.
No, not really. Let me see if I can find. I think I can answer you with a picture here. Okay, here we go. Hold on one second. Okay, if you all are seeing this picture, specifically the lower picture, you can see where the ladder is. Oh,
Brent, I'm sharing my screen. Which slide am I supposed to be going to? I have your site plan up and then followed by several pages with pictures.
oh, this would be, well, this would be, I'm looking at the picture called West Facade, picture number 2.
This
Okay.
is, what we're looking at now is the east wall. And,
Oh,
yeah,
are you seeing it? Is it coming through now?
Yes,
I've got the
Yeah.
west.
west facade picture number 2.
Mhm.
Now, in this view,
except that is not the west facade. That is, unless I'm really. Okay, I'm totally mixed up about what view that is. Now,
are you,
this, in the lower right-hand corner, that is the west side of the house.
yep,
The left-hand one is the south side of the house. Isn't it?
so can you all see when I am zooming out and zooming in? Is that showing on your end too?
No.
No, I'm sharing the screen, Brent, unless you want to take control.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. I didn't know that. I thought I was
Yeah,
controlling
so-
it.
Yeah, just let me know which specific pictures to pan to.
Oh, okay. I'm fine with you controlling it. It's fine. That
Okay.
actually will work out better for me. But the one that says West Facade, picture number 2. And then we just need to get Janny on board, is because I don't know if you're not recognizing it as that, or if I'm full of it, I should probably know at this point, but I'm quite certain that's the West Facade.
Okay, then yeah, just go ahead. You should never listen to me when it comes to directions.
All right, no problem. But
Okay.
okay, but so So, and just to make sure we're all looking at the same thing, the picture called West Facade Picture Number 2, well, even the one that's called West Facade Picture Number 1, for that matter, there's a ladder there.
Yes.
Okay, as long as we're seeing a ladder, we're on the same page. Well, that wing of the house is draining on that side, and to address some questions that were there about, is it going to change the drainage pattern? Now, the thing is, from the aerial view that we just looked at, you would be left with the impression that it's a jungle down there. but it's really not. I mean, if you have a view right in the monsoon season when all those trees are in full bloom, but otherwise there's just not that much going on in that area. There's plenty of trees in the backyard, and there's trees as well as you can see around the side yard area. But when you're looking at the picture West Facade Picture Number 2, if you imagine yourself walking down there past that ladder and past that last tree to walk around the corner of the house, that far corner of the house that has vines growing all over it, if you walked around there and turned to your left, you'd be walking around the existing rear of the house. 19 feet out from that is where the addition is coming from, and it's flat dirt. There's just nothing going on right there. There is the canopy of trees nearby, but there are no big trees that will have to be cut down to do that. It's flat dirt back there. And right now I'm going to undertake to find, if I can dial up a photo, and I may not have a photo of that looking straight on at the back. And I surmise the reason I don't is because there's nothing to look at. It's just a wall. But there's nothing but dirt back there. There's no specimen trees or anything. Certainly no saguaros or anything else prohibited that would have to be dug up or removed. Nothing like that. We'll be preserving the vegetation. Let me recommend to you another photograph here, which would be, I would think the good one would be, there's a photo called Rear Porch Picture Number 1. Now, whereas the last picture we were looking at was called West Facade, or whatever it was, West something, this picture shows that same far wing of the house from the east, or rather from the backyard side. And in this photo, you've got a porch right up in the foreground. And that's not the porch in question. It's that wing of the house in the back there that's the portion in question. And if you look at the left end of the picture called Rear Porch Picture Number 1, if you look toward the left end, you'll see that there's that 6-foot rear yard wall. And you can probably barely make out just behind the porch column, just behind that far porch column is where the gate in that wall is. A portion of that wall will simply be relocated because that wing of the house will be coming out 18 foot. But back in that area, outside that wall, and you can see there's some hedgerows back there, some shrubs, those are inside the wall. And they'll be even further inside the wall once the wall's relocated. But outside of that wall, there's just dirt. And most of those branches that you see from the trees are trees that are inside the backyard.
Okay.
Another good one.
No trees are going, and the drainage on that end is going to continue to, it'll drain the same direction that it's currently draining off of that end of the house.
Yes, it will.
That,
Yes, and
that
in
is correct.
terms of plantings in that yard, there is nothing but scrub bush back there.
Okay,
Yeah, because it's outside of our patio wall, so I don't maintain it. It's just scrub bush and dirt.
And I have another photo that's a good one. This one's called rear porch picture number 3. Rear porch picture 3. This one you can real clear see the wall and the gate, which will be somewhat relocated. But you can kind of see through the gate there what's out there. And it's like Janny says, it's scrub and dirt. But that's okay. We'll put it to good use. But I'll take a break here and just make sure if any of you have any questions.
I don't have any other questions. Margot or David, have you?
Briggs
No.
Klinko, I'm here too.
There.
I have a question about the window treatments. I'm noticing from the photos of the home that there are a variety of styles of window treatments. And the proposed side-by-side configuration. I'm just wondering why not to move forward with more double hung windows, which would be in the in the historic guidelines of Fort Lowell, where there never were windows that didn't have those undivided panes the way that you put in with those casement windows. All of the historic casement windows had small divided panes or double hung. And I'm just wondering about, even though I know this house does have a mixed treatment of the fenestrations, that why not move forward with the historically appropriate ones for the addition?
Okay, and I understand that point, and that's certainly doable. The thought process behind putting that one window there that is the casement style window. First of all, that window is satisfying a certain criteria for emergency egress. Is basically the code is, I'm sure you know, I won't bore you with it, but you know, the thing's on fire, there's a kid in there and they got to get out, or a dog. And so that's your emergency egress window. But the other thought behind having it be like that is that where we're going to put the double doors for egress from this new addition to the porch, in that area right now is actually a window of that same style. And so this was my attempt to sort of preserve that with that new window. Try to keep things the way they are as close as possible. So my answer to your question is that's why I erred on the side of doing that. It can certainly be changed. It's not a problem, but that would be the reasoning. A dual casement provides you with a nice big kind of opening that is user friendly for people who aren't terribly strong. Casement windows are much easier for smaller children or women to work than a double hung, especially if it's humid and the thing wants to get jammed up and it doesn't want to move. So it's got a good utilitarian purpose. Unfortunately, utilitarian purposes do not satisfy aesthetics. They're two different concerns. But that would be the aesthetic concern would be that there's a window of that style there right now. And so the attempt to preserve what's there as best as possible, but also a casement window is a good option to satisfy the emergency egress. Now, with that said, if it's necessary, it can certainly be. I can consult with the homeowner and we can put our heads together and take a look at that.
Yes, I guess for me, it's, I'm not clear about what the existing window treatments are from the drawings, and I'm not sure if you're able to point to them on the photographs, or if they're not, but I can see where they are on the elevation drawing here, but are they aluminum casement or what, like the current
Oh,
treatment?
those
is-
windows currently are they're wood windows from the inside, but from the outside they're metal clad and they're painted, and well, it's a fact, they're not site painted, it's a factory powder coat, white basically.
Okay. Do you have a picture of those down in that, on those porch? I wondered if one of those porch windows or something shows us what you're referring to.
Oh, well, probably the photo that's going to show it best might be the photo called rear porch picture number 3.
But Brent, I think if you go to the one that you have labeled as west number 2, or
Yeah.
that is east. That's our east window. And it's pointed the wrong, this is the east side of the house. Now go back upper left-hand corner here. No, down one. Okay, stop. No, come down again. Come down. No, other way. Other way. Keep going. One more. Nope, down. I want to see the photo. Okay, now, no, go back up. Okay, no, that's the west side. This is, okay, this is the upper left-hand side is the window for the existing bedroom that we are going to make very similar on the new addition, which is to the right of that ladder. So and if you look at yes, that window is the existing bedroom. And we're adding on to the right-hand side of this photo. And then to the left of that existing bedroom, but to the right in the photograph, it's called east. It's east something. Okay, there you go. Now we have this is the west side of the house. This is a bathroom window. This is an office window. That's why I was confused, because they're marked east, but it's actually, that's my apologies. This is the east side of the house. But before, when we were talking about east, you were talking about west, you were showing photos of the east, which is why I got all confused. But this is, all right, this is a west facade. It says east facade, pick 3. That is the west facade. And if you look below that,
All right.
the one that's
Yep,
labeled east facade, picture 3, that's the west side of the house.
Yep,
And
I'm seeing that now.
And this says east facade, picture 4, that's the west side of the house.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm seeing that now. I have east and west mislabeled on my photos.
That's why I thought I was losing my mind when I didn't recognize my own house.
No, you're not. You're right.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, when I first started trying to explain this with the photos that have the ladder and calling it the
ladder
west.
Somebody left it up there a few weeks ago, and that is, I don't even know how that ladder got there, but anyway.
Well, but that picture with the ladder in it that I was saying was west is actually east.
Correct.
Yeah, my bad. I did my labels wrong. I put the west where the east is and east where the west is.
So we're on the opposite side of the house that's going to be added on to right now.
Because it's on the back.
However,
right?
It's on
Where
the
the
west
ladder
side of
is.
the house, and we're adding on to the southeast of the house.
Yeah.
However, if you look at the photo called West Facade, picture number 1, it's actually the east facade, but the picture's called West Facade, picture number 1.
That's the window.
That's the window that I'm trying to match on the other side.
Yep.
And this one is so much wider than taller, and we talked about that. Briggs, as I look at this, and I think adding a new style of window, if it was visible, I would be definitely more concerned about it. I'm almost wondering though if matching what's existing in the house is acceptable. If it hadn't been there already, you know, if we wouldn't want to change this style. What do you think, Briggs? Tell me what you're, take it farther.
It's a little hard for me to understand the context of this window with the existing windows with the photographs provided. But I can see from other pictures that there's a mixed window treatment. Obviously, I want the house to come out with a great design. So it's definitely a tough determination.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get where you're coming from in terms of trying to mirror the other picture. At the same time, it is a 360 wrap of these properties. So for the zoning protection, so I think I'm reluctant to just excuse something to being in the backyard. At the end of the day, there are other homes surrounding this home and stuff. So just just trying to take it under consideration.
Yeah, I hear it and I agree. Okay. Okay. What else do we need to look at here? What else? What other information do people need? Do you want to show us those bottom pictures, Wyatt, on the next sets?
Those are photos of the neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
And none of
So,
these are your, yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And anybody have other questions on this? I guess not. Does anybody want to make a recommendation? And you're all hearing me, I hope.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. It's not usually a quiet group. Okay. I'm wondering if we could ask Janny and Brent to look at the other design of windows.
I think that is just fine. What I asked the architect and the eventual builder to do was to make it all look the same. So if that's my understanding anyway, and I guess I didn't pay close enough attention to realize that the windows are somewhat different than the existing windows, but I don't have a concern about that. I would be happy to put in whatever windows you feel are appropriate.
Okay, so Briggs, would you like to make a recommendation or a motion based on this?
So, like I say, that one window in question, that's a casement. That's a dual casement. on the west side of the addition, that there is a window identical to that there now. And that's why I put that style there. It actually
Can you
is.
clarify? Is that an operable window or is it a picture window?
Yeah.
It's an operable window.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an operable. They have two movable panels, casement style, and that window is exactly like there's a window exactly like that in that area now. Except when you look at the plans and it shows where there's going to be a double doors that offer egress into the backyard from the new addition. Right now, those are not double doors. It's a window that is the exact style of the casement that I'm proposing. But instead of that casement window being where it is right now, that existing window will actually be doors that open onto the rear porch. But right to the side of that, in the new bedroom space, will be that same style of window. So now I do understand what the woman, what one of you, I don't know your names, but was addressing earlier just now about being a double hung and how that seems to be common, and why would it not be a double hung and keep things the way they are? And that's true to a point. Yes, there are double hungs there, but there are also casements. And so that window is in keeping with what's there now.
Right.
The question I think that arises is, do we find that objectionable, and do we think that that was inappropriate for the historic look? But in all due consideration, it is what's there now.
Right. Brett, the double
Yes.
hung window can meet the legal requirement for egress.
5 square foot minimum opening. So you've got, yeah, I mean, yeah. It can. They're
Okay.
never as friendly to try to open. I mean, I remember a kid, and I had one in my upstairs bedroom, and when it got humid, you had a hard time opening it. Casements are a wonderful new type of thing with windows, because they're just, I mean, they can get bound up a little bit too, but they're just so much more user friendly. The important thing to consider, I think, with the casement style, but yes, to answer your question, yeah, you can get the minimum. The code wants you to have the maximum for an emergency egress window. And by the way, all windows don't have to be emergency egress windows. You just have to have the minimum requirement of them to satisfy safety. But
Right.
it's also worthy of note that when you're building or adding on a very small house or room to begin with, you're only going to have so many windows, period. So each one becomes more kind of important. You have to have the minimum egress. And so what they want is a sill height no greater than 44 inches off the finished floor, so that a child does not get stuck in a burning room. And they also want a minimum of 5 square foot clear opening. And yes, you can do that with a double hung. The thing I would like to point out also about the casement, not only is there actually a casement style window there now, but also the casement is such that even though the window itself is a squarish in shape, each individual movable panel is a vertically oriented panel. And because the windows have a white powder coat exterior finish, they tend to stick out from the orange stucco. So you're going to get that visual, how would you say it? You're going to get that visual impression of those two vertical oriented shapes, even though they're within an overall squarish unit. But such is the nature of the beast with casements. But anyway, that's all for me on that.
Okay. I guess we need a motion, and we can discuss after the motion is made. And I think it should address this window component. Can somebody make that motion?
Yes, I move that we accept the plans from Janie and her designers, but that we add some recommendations to that acceptance concerning the window treatments and any other topics that people wanted to mention.
Okay. So within that motion, we obviously are requesting that they please consider a double hung window in that site.
I actually believe it should be side by side double hung windows in this instance because of the
Okay.
proportions. Also I'm hoping that will satisfy the code requirements. It does seem that this window is very close to a door that could be used for egress in the event of a unnecessary egress. It's right next to a door.
Do you know?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. You are right about that. And technically you shouldn't even need to worry about an egress when you have perfectly good door right there. But the thing is, the code says that all bedrooms, like each room has to satisfy its own criteria. So even though I could say, hey, you got a door right there, the reviewer could come back and say, the code says you have to have this, but you are right. I mean, you're absolutely right. Common sense would dictate you have a door right there. If it needs to be a double hung in order for us to feel that it's really in keeping with what we want to preserve for the neighbor, it's not a problem. It's a simple fix.
Okay, and to clarify, side by side double hung, if you're going to be maintaining these proportions with the horizontal rectangle, and would be more appropriate than a single double hung that was a wide rectangle like that. Similar to the image that's immediately below what's up on the drawing that we're looking at, right below it, there's a double hung window drawing. They should be in a proportion similar to that side by side in those holes from the scaling that's being indicated from the drawing.
Could you indicate to me what sheet you're looking at? And I just want to follow you.
Oh, sorry. We're looking at drawings on page 8. And it's a simple elevation drawing that shows the double doors and this window hole in question that we're discussing.
Yep.
With
Okay, I'm there.
Operable casements. And then right below that, I'm seeing a drawing of a double hung window, or what looks like a double hung window.
Yep, that's what it is.
Yeah, so side by side double hung windows that are in a similar proportion to the bottom drawing.
Okay. Yeah, I follow you. That's doable.
So our motion currently is to accept the plans with this double hung side by side window treatment recommendation. Was there any other recommendation?
Yeah, I just like on clarity for the windows, is that the only window that's being replaced or added in this project?
Yes.
Thank you.
Let's see. Oh, hold on. Your question was replaced or added.
Correct.
Well, it's the only window that's being, let me see here. Well, okay. When you look at my elevation drawings, the double doors are replacing an existing window.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only element of which it can be said is replacing. All of the other elements are being added. So the total of windows added is 2 and 1 single door on the other side of the house, but only 2 windows are being added.
And the 2 windows are side by side, correct?
Well, they're the one which is now reading as a casement on the west elevation, and the other on the east elevation, which is a double hung.
Okay, oh, so
Oh,
that's also a new window. Understood. Thank you. And it's already double hung in the drawing.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
So it would match that double hung window on the east facade. Okay,
So with it being side by side, right?
side by side, double hung
Right.
on
I
the
would
west.
like to second Briggs's motion. If we have that clearly stated.
Okay, those in favor?
I second it. Or third.
Margot?
Yeah.
Aye. Okay, David,
Aye.
Briggs?
I motion.
Okay, okay. So that passes. Thank you.
Very, very much.
Right.
Thank you, Janny.
I
That's
really
great.
appreciate your time, and we will do a good job, and you'll be proud of us.
Well, it does look like a jungle back there from that, that over.
It is.
About view, yeah, so enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, folks.
Bye.
Thank you, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so let's go back to the agenda. And the next piece of the agenda, I believe, is the design review guidelines, the technical standards. And those have been distributed previously. Did everybody have a chance to look at them? I hope.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Briggs, did you get a chance to review them? I'm sorry, Briggs. Are you still there?
Yes, sorry, put mute on.
Okay. Did you get a chance to review the design review guidelines?
Yes.
Okay. Were there any questions, anything that didn't sit well with you, anything that you felt, anybody felt we needed to rework? Okay. Elaine did an awful lot of prep on this. I really appreciate that, Elaine. Do we want to take a motion then on these?
Well, I think we should discuss them. I don't think we're quite ready for that, but
Okay, what area, did you have an area of that you were hoping to discuss, Elaine?
yeah, I mean, if you don't mind, I'd like to just go through them, just walk through them.
Sure. Will you lead
We
us?
can make
Go
comments
for it.
in
Yep.
each part of it, if we need to. I'd also like some feedback from the city.
Okay, and so I think
Can you-
Corin
Oh,
and Wyatt are.
If you don't, Lou, let me go ahead and guide this, if you don't mind.
I wish you
Could
would.
could somebody magnify those? I'm having difficult reading those. There we go.
Sorry, thanks.
That's okay. No, thanks, Wyatt.
So I'll just kick it off and then I'll just step through it. And what we may need to do is come back to certain areas to discuss it, but let me just step through it first and explain the approach. So we met about different aspects of this last year, different points that we wanted to change that were in the existing guidelines from 2004. So you can see that they were old and they were much abbreviated even from what was in the technical standard. The handout that we used was a shortened version of the existing guidelines. And then we talked to Corin and Jody, gosh, maybe March, April, about how to do this, about how to approach revising the guidelines. And it's my understanding that what we do is we go through it as a board, it's presented, now it's been public, it's been posted as a public document for review. And correct me anywhere along here, Corin or Daniel, that it goes from us to review by the PRS, Plans Review Subcommittee of the Commission, and then to the City Development Review Committee, and then to CDRC, and then the
That is
Development
the
Director.
CDRC. Yeah.
Pardon?
The City Design Development Review Committee is the CDRC. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they review it. And then the Development Director, and then the City Manager. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're the first step here. And I want to make sure that what we have in here is really appropriate and correct. So what I did, I took the existing guidelines and just modified them. And what you see is anything in black is the existing guidelines as they stand right now. What's in blue has been added. And I went back to a lot of this language that was in the technical standard. And I added some more historic information on those first 2 pages. I also added the information about the annexation, 1992, because that introduces some other information that wasn't in the guidelines about the buffer zone and the height limitations in the buffer zone. And then just some more narrative about the historic zone. So that's all stuff that I'm sure you've all seen before. If not in this document, you've seen it in other documents. But I think it helps to have this narrative in there for anybody who's not familiar with the zones. So that's the first 2 pages. That map there is the annexation map. So that is the map that took the county zones and converted them to city zones. And as far as I know, that's still current. I think it's still current, and I don't know if we need another map, and this is a question for the city about another map for the zone itself. I had a request from somebody else that there be a map that shows the contributing historic properties on the map in the guidelines. And I've seen that map somewhere, but I don't have it, the one that has the contributing historic properties on it. And I don't think I've seen that kind of map in any of the other historic zones in their technical standards. So keep going through that down to purpose, minor change there, applicability. Much of the language that's added in the next couple of pages is actually coming from the West University Historic Zone Guidelines. So I made an assumption that if it was acceptable and for West University, that it's probably still acceptable. I don't remember when their guidelines were published, but that would also be something that we would want to look at and see if they apply here. Obviously, a lot of their guidelines did not apply, but it talks about applicability here. The next page talks about governance and process. And I tried to leave that as generic as possible because most of that is in the applications. I took out any of the details about how to do the application because if that changes, then we don't want to have to change the guidelines again. And it's all spelled out in the city online links. Then down to minor review, where it talks about minor review. minor modifications. The requests of the people who've reviewed this so far have asked that new walls and fences require full review because they have been put forward in the past as minor reviews. So we think they should always be full reviews. And then considering the exterior appearance or view shed, and I think, Mary Lou, you asked for that to be added about view shed, and I don't really remember why.
The areas, yes, the view shed, that a minor review, which includes the front perimeter and any area seen by neighbors.
Oh.
So that if
Okay.
Janny wants to change that wall and that wall it can be seen, then I think it should be at least have a minor review.
Right, okay. Classifications, this is in the next page, talks about the classifications. This is from the existing with an addition that in that blue text there you'll see about new construction and contributing non-historic. So what we just reviewed was a contributing non-historic structure. And the fact that they have to be compatible with their other non-historic structures in their development zone, but also compatible with the contributing historic structures. So that discussion we just had about windows kind of applies there because the design guidelines call for double hung or casement windows, but our original guidelines were talking about divided light steel casement windows or wood casement windows, where those casement windows weren't divided light. So that's a question. I mean, that's where your review is applicable, right? And in that case too, where they had put in sliders, I think there probably were sliders in that house too, that would have been approved in the 80s, right?
Right.
Where now you'd really want to say on an addition, if you want to compare to the contributing historic structures, you would want them to be double hung. So I thought that was a good example. And then the other thing about this classification is about incremental development. Fort Lowell isn't like any other historic zone as far as the way organic incremental development and the ratio of contributing non-historic to contributing historic. So in our zone, there are probably 30 historic structures and probably 70 non-historic, contributing non-historic structures. So it's important to keep that in mind and to look at that, during the review. The next piece about development zone, that part that's italicized there is right from the technical standard, and it doesn't have to be in this document because it's in the technical standard, but I left it in there just for discussion and for review. The next piece that's blue, Fort Lowell Development Zone, addresses the fact that there are building styles, different building styles located side by side or across the street from each other. And again, you have this incremental organic development that doesn't really, that the development zone concept of blocks doesn't really work. And I think this is something that we're going to have to work through and find out from the city about how to handle this. Because there are blocks in Fort Lowell. There, I'm at 5301, and the next block down is at 5400. But by the city's, but for our current interpretation, there's no street, there's no city street in between those blocks. Then you go to 5500, all in the same block. So we're talking about a quarter mile of development that's organic, that doesn't really fit with the development zone standard. And then another piece of that, and maybe what we can do is go through it and come back to this topic, about roads, about public or private roads being a divider of a development zone. So we have a private road in that block, in that quarter mile. So let's come back to that. Let's keep going. That's the example that's in the technical standard for Fort Lowell. Incremental development, because the development, but yeah, it's right there, it's fine. And not only the development zone and the incremental development patterns, but the contributing and non-historic and contributing historic mix of properties. So keep going to types of improvements. There are also some typos in here that, as I was sitting here looking at, I'm finding. Types of improvements, new construction. This comes from West University, abbreviated version of West University. And then there are a couple of additions here that are unusual. Front entrances are not often oriented towards the main street. Some houses are, some houses aren't. Concrete sidewalks and raised curbs are not allowed in the historic zone. They're also not allowed in our neighborhood plan. So that's why Fort Lowell has no concrete sidewalks. And there aren't any curbs, there aren't any raised curbs. On the next page, this should all be pretty familiar. It's just stated in different sections. It might be repeated in some cases because in different sections it might have the same information. Secondary buildings and structures. I put in stuff about ADU here, but I really don't know what's happening with ADUs as far as it relates to historic zones. So that again, I think maybe should be a separate discussion with more information from the city.
I'll just comment that I know this is coming up in Barrio Viejo as well, where they've had application for one of the pre-approved plans. It was a pre-application conversation, but it's definitely coming up in some of the other neighborhoods as well, as the city continues to ease the way for people to put them in.
Yeah, and there is, I think, a meeting this week, like a public meeting about ADUs. Is there going to be any kind of, Corin, is there going to be any separate discussion with historic zones about ADUs?
That was not planned, but we can definitely make sure that we're sharing that information with all the HPZ boards over the next several months. But I can say that, so basically design review is still required for an ADU in any HPZ or historic landmark site. So it still has to go through the full design review process. There are pre-approved plans. Those are pre-approved for building code. There's no pre-approval of any sort of design when it comes to the placement in the historic zone. So just because it's pre-approved for building code, basically means you meet building code. We still, when you're proposing a specific site to use it, go through zoning review. If it's in an HPZ, that would require historic review. But yes, there are a few we are making some changes to our ADU regulations right now, driven by the recent state legislation. And there's 2 meetings this week on that. One is tomorrow at I think noon, and the other is Wednesday or Thursday.
Wednesday at 5:30, I believe. Or no, it's Thursday. Wait, now I'm confused.
Okay.
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday at 5:30, yeah.
I tried to keep it rather generic and just said that the ADU, and again, it followed what was already in West University about they need to they should defer to the main structure, basically. And then, of course, if they are still undergoing a design review, then all the issues about heights and volume and things like that, I think would still be reviewed.
Is that volume on here?
Sorry, I'm
Is
sorry.
that, when you look at this in this secondary area, I'm not seeing anything that talks about volume or how much property, how much property it can take up. I don't know how to say that. I'm sorry, Elaine. That you can't add it says you can't add a ADU that's bigger than the house. It can't overwhelm the house. But if you're on a small lot, can you fill the lot by adding an ADU?
Okay.
Does that ratio of lot to home still stand when you add an ADU?
If it's a question for me, the standards are like up to 1,000 square feet, I think, or that's what's being proposed. It'd be bigger than some of our houses.
So, yeah, all the lot coverage standards would still apply to an ADU. And again, it would need to go through the historic design review
Okay.
process where you would look to design guidelines like this. And there are also guidelines in the UDC in the historic overlay section related to accessory structures specifically.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, alterations, additions and alterations. Again, this is much taken from West University, except there is some additional stuff about contributing historic properties. But the rest of it, additions to the rear, keep additions simple and appropriate in size. I mean, those are all, it's all pretty common sense as far as design. Scale, that's where addresses the original scale, roof form, roof elements, things like that. On the next page, demolition is from the original guidelines, design criteria. There's a suggestion to add a couple of more styles into this mix than what we have right now. Territorial and Pueblo Revival. And that's to accommodate some, like Margot's house is more territorial than anything else that's described here. And Pueblo Revival is really kind of an adaptation of Sonoran Ranch, Santa Fe Sonoran Ranch. So we'd have to get, we don't have drawings for those, we'd have to get some drawings for those.
Okay.
Site utilization tax is the same. Go ahead.
No, I just was agreeing, sorry.
Height and proportion. This was already approved, this language in a previous meeting, I think in December, November, December. And it has to do with primarily with heights and, you know, to take the calculated average height of the historic properties within the development zone and then to make it compatible with the historic property heights. The Post Trader store is excluded from the comparison because it's a unique property within the preservation zone with height and proportion that's not comparable to any other property. What I have also need to clarify is whether or not for residential properties you could compare to public properties because they're, you know, they're public properties. You know, 70 acres of the historic zone is Fort Lowell Park and Fort Lowell structures.
This is
So-
really great that you're specifying that this language is getting specified. And I think it is reflective of the development code in which it is pointing to a typical height, not the prevailing highest height. And like, I think this does an outstanding job of highlighting a typical height does not mean that you can build to the highest thing that is there. It's a typical height. So good job.
So do you want to add that? That's what you just
I like,
said.
no, I like that you've put it out there. It's in quotes there, on the first paragraph under height and proportion.
Okay. Thanks. The very bottom paragraph there says if there are no contributing historic properties in the development zone, the height of any building can't be more than 400 feet, 14 feet. And then that's within the zone itself. The height of the structures in the buffer zone are 16. I believe it's a 16-foot limit, except for the Gregory School, where they had those ordinances. So the buffer zone right now is completely undeveloped. Well, it's not completely undeveloped. There are a couple of properties in there that could be developed. But my question was about the comparison between residential and public and institutional structures in a development zone. So you may have you may be in the development zone with a park where the commissary is in your development zone, and it's a public structure. And actually, this was discussed at the PRS back in April, and Dan was the expert. They said Dan was the zoning guru.
Yeah, so it would have to adhere to the UDC definition for development zone, and in the UDC definition for development zone, it does list public and institutional as being a part of the development zone. That said, when you're looking at it, it's one of many things that would be a criteria for how you review building height and scale and everything else. So while it could be included as a part of that, you also do look at the use as well and look at that kind of holistically. So it is included and could be potentially included in this situation, but again, it's part of the whole review.
Okay. Okay, so any comments about that or questions about that? So how would you approach it? How would you approach it to exclude them, for example?
So it would come down again to the Unified Development Code, and it would be an amendment to the actual Unified Development Code. You wouldn't be able to exclude it just via the design guidelines. So it would require a change to the UDC, which is something that's initiated by mayor and council, goes through a full public process, goes through our planning commission. As a planning commission public hearing, they make a recommendation to mayor and council, then mayor and council have a public hearing. That's how you would go through excluding those from that.
So instead, you'd have to address them, right? You'd have to include them as part of the review, but address it as incompatible with the proposal?
Yeah, it would. It would. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lauren.
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, I think it really depends what the proposal is and how that proposal relates to the institutional, public or institutional building. You know, if it is a comparison that does relate or a proposal that does relate, there could be reasons to look at that institutional building as a design precedent, et cetera. And even maybe look at it as a design precedent, but not so much around height or something like that. I mean, I think the way that the code is intended to provide some flexibility so that each project can be reviewed on a somewhat case-by-case basis. And that development zone is somewhat, you know, flexible in terms of what precedents you're looking at between different structures. So if it was, you know, an institutional building like the Gregory School, for example, that's, you know, it's private school, but it is a somewhat public type use. So there could be reason that does make sense to use for that structure to use other public buildings as a reference, or vice versa, to use Gregory School as a reference, a precedent for some development. So it really, whereas a residential development, I think you could make the case, okay, these public institutional buildings might not be an appropriate design reference.
And I guess where we would use it is in the park, where there are proposals in the park, where it would be compared to their structures in the park. Okay, moving on. Pattern and rhythm. This is something that's come up in several reviews about walls having an irregular profile. So having an irregular profile, and Mary Lou says that pretty much every review is softened and rounded edges. So that was not previously in the design guidelines. Roofs Sloping porch roofs can be clad with shingles or metal. Traditionally, there are metal roofs in the neighborhood, but they've been put on without review. Except for the park, where they put metal roofs on the officers' quarters. But corrugated metal, standing seam are really not compatible with historic structures in the other areas, depending on the development zone. The other materials are reviewed case by case. On those bungalows, those 1927 bungalows, those were probably cedar shingles that were replaced by asphalt shingles. That's just something to keep in mind. And then the other thing that wasn't addressed in the other guidelines is solar panels. Satellite dishes we could probably take off. I don't think many people have satellite dishes anymore, but maybe not. Go ahead down to the next page.
Yeah.
There's some up here in the mountains. I see satellite dishes.
Yeah, I'm looking at one out my window.
You are?
Yeah, yeah. On great grandma's, the back part of great grandma's house. I just noticed it when you said that. Huh.
Texture, color, talking about stucco. It just clarifies about cement stucco, acceptable on concrete or frame construction. Stucco on adobe should be lime stucco. And it just goes into a little more detail about that. And also that stucco should not be completely removed and left off. And that when it's repaired, it needs to be repaired in kind. So there's a lot of detail in here that I haven't seen in other places. I saw some of this in West University, but others of it, as it applies to Adobe, is kind of new information. Also to replace brick, and it talks a bit about mortar and not using cement that's too hard because it'll cause your Adobe to fail. I just had a big project on my house. Go ahead and scroll down a bit. I put information about paint in here because in the case of repainting, well, it's in that section there. I just had, the paint came off my house in sheets because they had sealed the Adobe with a sealer and then they painted it with impermeable paint. So it was quite a big job to do it. Scroll down more, that existing projections, architectural detail hasn't changed, doors, and then windows. This is interesting after our previous discussion. Double hung or casement wood frame windows are most historically correct. And really that reference to casement wood frame windows, those are divided like casement windows. And so we can add that as being the most historically correct. Painted steel casement windows are common. And that was also a question from somebody who reviewed this, who said the casement windows that are in this, or that are around, that have been added in the 40s, 30s and 40s are, you know, they're everywhere. So acceptable, they're common. Whether you can still build with them, I don't know. Vinyl clad aluminum or synthetic windows are not allowed. So what they were talking about now was wooden windows with aluminum, wood inside, aluminum outside. And I think other historic zones are also accepting that now. So this might need to be changed. Vertical dimensions should be greater than horizontal. I thought that discussion in the previous case too was interesting because that window had horizontal dimensions greater than vertical. Even though he had divided it as a casement, it's still, the proportion of the window was still primarily horizontal. But it depends on the style of the building. So where they had a mix of windows in that house, I think it was appropriate what Brooks did, where she said they need to be double hung because the ones on the other side of the house were all double hung. They were smaller windows, but they were double hung windows. And I also think that if you're doing an addition like that, my opinion, if you're doing an addition like that, that you really are trying to compare against the contributing historic features and not the features that were built in 1980.
whenever possible, any improvement should be returning to the
Right.
historic features. So even though this previously had the casement window, it's now moving towards the double hung, which hopefully over time, theoretically, the whole house would.
Right. That's good. So yeah, thanks for doing that. Gates, security doors, and window grates. The intention here is to try to keep things as simple and rural as possible in compliance with the historic zone. So things like gates and window grates particularly, the modern designs have like cocopellis and quails and things like that in them. So those would probably want to be discouraged. Go ahead, down side elements. Landscaping, instead of original vegetation, native vegetation should be retained. Storm runoff for passive irrigation, native desert should not be covered with DG. I think the city has code that says you have to cover, for dust control, you have to cover with 2 inches of DG. Well, that would not really be a positive addition to most of the areas in Fort Lowell. So you have to do dust control, but to cover an entire lot with DG, I don't think would be appropriate. When used, they should match the color of the earth. Plants in the public view should come from the native plant book that we published in 2012, ideally. Enclosures, fences, walls, this was also previously approved, and the idea being that you want to limit the height of walls to 4 feet in public spaces. And then there was an addition here based on reviews. What we approved before was this, where it starts blue, Ratake Yatia's vertical slats and wrought iron are acceptable. But it was pointed out that historically in our neighborhood, it's wire fences, field fences and 4-foot chain link fence. And there are still several of those around. And Ocotillo fences are seen. So the other code, I think in some of the other technical standards, it says they shouldn't be chain link. But in fact, historically, chain link's accepted here. Corrugated metal and solid sheet metal aren't acceptable. The height of the privacy wall can obstruct the public view of the buildings and structures. And then again, it says gate design because it's about enclosures. It should be simple without modern or elaborate decorative design. So someone said, well, what do you mean by modern design? Well, it's subjective, right? That's what the review is about, is compatibility. Concrete sidewalks are not allowed. Mailboxes, modern mailboxes are not allowed. Again, what's modern, Go ahead and scroll down. Utilities, this was also a comment because it said strongly discouraged, and the person who reviewed it said this shouldn't allow it. Above ground utilities and new construction. So we're talking about poles, right? Primarily boxes. Whenever possible, undergrounding is encouraged. The next section is just a correction of some of the city contacts and information. And then down below that are neighborhood contacts, the neighborhood association, and then the references.
Quite a document, Elaine. Very nice. Do you propose discussion on this now? What is your next step?
Well, yeah, discussion. So does anyone have any concerns? First of all, start there. Did you hear anything that you said, that's not right?
Lauren has her hand up.
Yeah, I would like to share a little bit, from the city perspective, then of course you guys should all discuss as well. I think, yeah, this is a tremendous amount of work, Elaine and others who worked on this. Thank you for putting this together. And I think it's great to really put out there as much as possible what you as an advisory board are looking for based on precedents in the neighborhood and based on what kind of the styles are that you're looking for, because it helps applicants then prepare for the process. Our concerns are really just anywhere that there could be discrepancy with the UDC and the codes that apply to all historic preservation zones. So Dan mentioned that earlier, for example, excluding institutional public buildings, that's something that's actually in the code. So the design guidelines can't go against the UDC unless there is a UDC amendment. That's something that can be done, amendments to the UDC, but it would apply to all historic preservation zones. So the couple areas that we noticed where it looks like discrepancy is one, the walls and fences, requiring those to be a major review. I think right now most of those are minor reviews, and I believe that's actually something in the UDC where we have criteria for major versus minor reviews for historic preservation zones. So that's something to look at. I think the development zone, as we've discussed, that's something we've mentioned previously, that defining the development zone differently than the UDC would be a UDC amendment to change that for Fort Lowell. So the UDC uses public streets as the defining boundary of a development zone. So that's one of the things we've discussed a few times. Understood that Fort Lowell has a different context and character. And so there may be a way to have language in here that's, rather than saying this is the boundary, saying, these are the areas we're going to look at more closely as design precedents is, within the immediate vicinity or, something along those lines. But changing the development zone would be a UDC amendment. Similarly, there's language in here about coming up with a comparable development zone for a development if there are not enough properties in the development zone, I think. And right now there is a process for that already that's laid out in the code, that if there are not enough properties in the development zone to provide enough of a precedent, that goes through a review process where the applicant proposes a different development zone and it's reviewed by the zoning administrator. So it's actually, there is a process in the UDC for that. And I think that, yeah, so here you have the language up, thanks Wyatt, where it says, if there is no contributing historic property, the design review applicant will work with Fort Lowell to identify appropriate properties and formally approve those comparisons. So that conflicts with the process in the UDC right now, where it's the zoning administrator. And the reason it's the zoning administrator is because the zoning administrator's decision is appealable. There's a process for that. And just keep in mind that the advisory board is set up as an advisory board, essentially. That's how it's established in the UDC. And does not have decision-making authority. If the body did have decision-making authority, there would be appeal processes and all kinds of more formalized review processes. So that is a conflict. I think that it's definitely possible to require or encourage consultation with the advisory board and things like that when developing an alternate development zone, but at least the way it's written right now does conflict with the UDC. And then the other aspect was the calculation for heights and putting together like a formal methodology where the heights are all averaged to create the maximum building height. That also conflicts with the UDC, which says that the maximum height is based on the development zone, but it doesn't lay out, such a specific method. Right now, it just says that
can you point to where that is in the code, since I'm looking at the code on the internet right now?
Yeah, it's section 589B, Briggs. So it says it in a few ways because it talks about different types of development, but it says new construction or alterations or additions to a non-contributing property shall be constructed no higher than the tallest contributing property located within its development zone and shall generally conform to the typical height within the development zone. So the maximum is the tallest, and then there's language that it should generally conform to the typical height. So it doesn't restrict it to a typical height.
But
Lauren?
in the spirit of the intent and purpose of the historic zone, which is to, I mean, at the whole beginning of the code, there's an intent and purpose stated at 581. And it says that the purpose is to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood, and always building to maximum height isn't in the spirit of maintaining the purpose of these historic zones. So while it says that there is a maximum height that's being made known, it's followed by a text. To me, it's rather interpretive, what you're saying, around what the UDC says, excuse me.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there's reasons that the the HPZ advisory board doesn't always need to recommend the going with height of the tallest structure. There's other design considerations that could be taken into account there. Other design precedents, other characteristics of that property, etc. But that is what the UDC states right now, that the maximum height is the tallest contributor in the development zone. So again, this would conflict with that.
So are you saying, Corin,
Mhm.
this is Mary Lou, are you saying that there's like a paragraph or a section that actually says the Post Traders store is not comparable to any other historic resource in the neighborhood, so it is not considered? Are you saying that component in particular needs to be omitted?
No, I was
from
talking
our
about the paragraph above where it says typical height is calculated. It says no design will be approved that is taller than the typical height within the development zone, and then the typical height within the development zone is calculated by taking an average height of all contributing historic properties from within the approved development zone. That's what conflicts with the UDC, which states that the maximum height is the tallest contributor in the development zone, and that the height should generally conform with the typical height, which just leaves a little more flexibility for site by site review, kind of project by project.
Okay, because my concern with our development zone, the way that we don't have any streets, every house that comes could be built like the Post Traders store, could be built at that height, because every lot in the neighborhood is now included, and that's going to be pretty rough.
Well, so again, that doesn't mean that the advisory board has to recommend that height. It does mean that someone can make the case, though, for a height of the tallest contributor in their development zone. So a couple things. So on the Post Trader, though, since you brought that up, Mary Lou, I think I know what you guys are looking for there. I understand your concerns about that height, that it's 16 feet. I think here, to support this, we would want to understand a little more what makes that building unique. So unique that it needs to be excluded as a design in terms of, or a precedent in terms of height and proportion. It obviously is unique, but I think this needs a little more in terms of the rationale in order to support this in terms of policy, because every structure is unique in historic districts. That's often what makes them so special. And, we just don't want to set a precedent of excluding certain buildings for, just because of height or something like that from a development zone. So just want a little more understanding of how this structure is so distinct that it would not be a comparison for height and proportion.
Okay.
Those are sort of our general comments. It's just, we're looking at how can this, we're looking at potential conflict with the UDC. Again, section 5.8 that applies to all historic preservation zones. But, you know, in general, I think adding more clarity is a good thing for applicants and for the board. So I think this is a great start, and I think this will be really helpful. I agree with Elaine that I think there's some good discussion to be had over, you know, several meetings on some of these topics. And we were thinking it could be helpful for us to provide some feedback in writing in terms of where we see conflicts with the UDC. So kind of a response to this that might help the next conversation if we provide some of that. So like you were asking about, you know, where does the UDC have some of those reference sprigs? So we can provide that. And that might help continue the conversation.
I would just pulling it up for the
Edith,
context of this conversation where I read the code regularly all the time now because of being on the board.
So Corin, I would really, for one, would really appreciate those kinds of written comments and responses that you alluded to. That would be very helpful for me. You know, going back, well, no, that's okay. I'll save that question.
I was just going to say, I think that would help too, because then we can go to the next step.
Yes. Yeah, I feel sort of ill-equipped to speak about those now without having sort of looked at those and having a kind of side-by-side document to kind of refer with each other. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good. We started pulling together some of our comments and discussing internally this week, but hadn't had a chance to really write that out as a response, but we'll definitely do that in advance of the next meeting.
Great. Yeah, if you could do it as you can. I know you guys are busy.
Yeah.
Then that'll allow us to get together too. Really.
Yeah.
And be ready for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And thank you again, Elaine, for this is terrific.
Yeah, it wasn't just me. So, but
well,
thank you.
Whoever. I know you were heavily involved. So.
And one area that I think that I'm interested in drawing more from the code into our own guidelines is that overall intent and purpose of the historic zones. And I know that we have a section, but I feel that we can enhance it further from the development code language that is, you know, paramount to the entire topic of the preservation zones. It's the leading context of the code.
So what do you suggest? To put that into that name be a narrative in the guidelines?
I would reflect more of the Unified Development Code purpose and intent language in the Fort Lowell purpose and intent. I think that part of the UCD it's really clarifying, why does this zone exist and what are we trying to do here, and what's the intent behind the formation of the zone, regardless of any you know, policy sort outs that happen with the language following over the many years that the code has continued to be developed. I could follow up with you directly. Yeah, I'd be happy to follow up with you about that, Elaine.
Yeah, let's talk about that, and maybe we can just write it.
Sounds great.
So question, Corin, so if we get through this and we get to the point where we have a document that we're ready to bless next time we meet, then how long does the rest of the process take?
I would guess it would take, you know, probably 3 to 4 months after that, depending on how it went with PRS. So I think when we shared kind of an overview of how some other advisory boards have approached this, we mentioned that Armory Park had been working on updates to their design guidelines for over a year, I believe, and took them to PRS. Wyatt might know, I mean, I think about a year ago, perhaps, got some feedback on things to change. And I'm not sure where that is. I don't know that it's gone back to PRS. Wyatt, do you know when that was that they took an update to PRS?
I just don't remember.
Okay, that's fine. So just to say there's some unknowns. And if PRS, approves in one meeting, then probably 3 to 4 months, or should probably put in a little more time there, 5 to 6 months. But there could be comments from PRS, or questions they have that take more review and discussion.
Okay.
Okay. Very good. Wyatt, do you want to put the agenda back up? I think that completes our agenda.
Yes, let me get there again.
And so we've got a call to the audience. There's a couple of people here, Elaine and Dan. Anything?
I don't have anything else.
Okay. Before we adjourn, I would like to ask for so that the design review guidelines stay on the agenda for next meeting, as well as a nomination to the board, so that we can make a formal nomination of Dan Hill to the board next time, because he has attended multiple meetings and has expressed an interest in participating in the board. Is that where I put this information, or does that go somewhere else during the meeting?
You're asking about future agenda?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what.
Yeah, so for the future agenda, is this so that we have a plan for next time?
Does it look like there's any items for review next month?
I think there's the formal review of the commissary project that Drew Cook spoke about maybe 3 months ago. That's the only thing I can think of.
Okay, so the next meeting.
That might be in August. Yeah. But we can add those items to the agenda, Mary.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Very good. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody want to move to adjourn?
I do.
Second. Somebody needs to second.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. Otherwise, we'll sit here for a while. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good
Thank
night.
you, city folks. And
Thanks
good
all.
to be with
everybody.
y'all. Bye-bye.
Folks.